Fish Unfiltered, episode 64. I am here with my good friend and co-host, Isaac Azout, and we have Ely Sussman joining us as well, founder of Fish On First. We have a lot to talk about. It's been a while, but we're excited to be back, and I think the last time we did this, the manager was Skip Schumaker, and now it's Clayton McCullough, former first base coach of the Los Angeles Dodgers, World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers, and he spoke to the media yesterday. There was his introduction. We're filming this on Tuesday, November 19th. He was introduced on Monday in the afternoon, and there was a lot to take away, not even just from what McCullough said, but comments from Bruce Sherman and Peter Bendix. Isaac, let's start with McCullough. He comes from a pretty good background for the most part, very development-heavy background. Was at the Blue Jays for a very long time. He was a minor league manager over there. Goes to the Dodgers, becomes, I believe, a field coordinator at the minor league level. And for the last 4 years, he's been with the Dodgers as the first base coach. And a lot of praise has been given to Mr. McCullough from players such as Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani, and even Dave Roberts. So this seems for the most part like a pretty good hire. Doesn't seem like this was the first choice for the Marlins, obviously, after what happened with Will Venable and Craig Albernaz. But McCullough was a pretty damn good choice at the end of the day, and seems like this is the guy the Marlins want, as he is perfectly aligned with what they want to do.
Right. Yeah. Like you said, Kevin, we have a lot to discuss today. The introductory press conference on Monday, November 18th. And then obviously tonight, we're recording this on Tuesday, like you said, the Rule 5 deadline to add all Rule 5 eligible players to the Marlins 40-man roster. And we will touch on that in the second half of the show. But to answer your question about McCullough, yeah, the Marlins seem very excited about the 17th manager in franchise history. I think the last time we spoke, we were just getting the report that Skip had told his players and his clubhouse that he will not be returning in 2025. But yeah, McCullough, a lot of experience in player development, the son of a scout, spent several years in the Toronto Blue Jays minor league system, mostly in rookie ball and low A managing over there. And then he went to the Dodgers, like you said, field coordinator, then became the first base coach. And I guess the one peculiar part about this is that he had never really spent much time in the upper minors or in the major league level as either a bench coach or a major league manager. So I think that's probably one thing where he's really going to have to depend on some experience when it comes to choosing his coaching staff. The only, not even confirmed yet, the only guy that we are hearing it will be added to that staff is Pedro Guerrero as the hitting coach, but he still has to choose a bench coach, pitching coach, third and first, and a lot more positions are yet to be filled. But yeah, first impressions were he's an extremely stand-up, nice guy. He seems to share some of the same viewpoints and messages that Skip Schumaker would share. I guess just like we talked about last time, a lot less intimidating, a lot more approachable, I would say. He spent, I would say, at least 2 hours doing one-on-one interviews, including the presser. He did TV. He did like 4 different TV outlets. He did You and I, as that video is now on Fish on First Twitter's account. Yeah, like I said, very nice guy, strong baseball background, and I'm very excited to get to know him even more so in the winter meetings and then in spring training, where he resides in Jupiter. He lives with his family, his 3 wonderful children. They live in Jupiter, Florida for the last few years, and I think he did mention it a couple of times that the geography of this whole situation had a big thing to do with it.
Yeah, and it needs to be noted that he was interviewed for, I believe, the White Sox job this year. He was also interviewed for the Marlins job when Skip got that one. But Eli, anything else you want to add on McCullough?
Something I just thought about a little bit more, and I guess you can make fun of it, the fact that they keep harping on the fact that he's a local guy, that he's around Jupiter in this market already. It did strike me when right after the press conference last night, the Marlins had this special dinner for their pillar partners, for some of their bigger sponsors, and he was there. I know people were wondering, how quickly he's getting to know his own players, and he actually got to physically meet with Sandy and Xavier Edwards, Nick Fortes. Those are the ones I saw. There may have been even more guys at that dinner last night, but it just got me thinking about this offseason in general. Like, a disproportionate percentage of Marlins players live even during the offseason in South Florida. Part of that is because their spring training is just a short drive away in Jupiter. So Skip, of course, for people that were unfamiliar, he was based out in California, and he would spend, obviously, the vast majority of his offseason over there. It's just a little perk where I think it's a lot easier for him to have those in-person meetings with a lot of his players. In addition to those guys, there are a handful of others on this 40-man roster. Jesus Luzardo, to name one. Braxton Garrett is now a South Florida guy. Even ones that potentially could be around in this organization for a while longer. A lot of the top prospects that haven't quite debuted yet, but are going to be big league spring training, they're based in Miami. So even if not exactly down the street from him, I think that is a perk that you get to have some face time and some more intimacy with your players leading up to this first spring training coming up. That's my main takeaway. Other than that, I kind of endorse what you guys mentioned. That's a different vibe than Skip had, but it's as long as he's himself and is true to who he is, I think that is the most important thing. Players really gravitate towards guys who are genuine and comfortable in his own skin. It is an interesting challenge. I kind of roll my eyes at some of the things that were mentioned in this press conference. Bruce Sherman mentioned how the success that his minor league teams had that he managed, even though I think anybody understands that wins and losses at the minor league level could not be any less relevant or less correlated to the actual talent that's on your team. I think any way you slice it, it's a risk whenever you hire a first-time manager, especially one that hasn't even had bench coach experience. It's a much different role than even what he did in the minors and even what he did the past 4 years as a first base coach. There's always some uncertainty about this. As much research as you do, even getting to know these guys in person, I'm not going to dance around that. There's just a big question mark in terms of how this could go. I said the same thing about Skip 2 years earlier. As long as the Marlins keep hiring these first-time managers, there's always that uncertainty about it if it's a brand new role for this person.
And I think that's the interesting thing too, because with Skip, he was a bench coach, and this guy isn't. So I think that's a big reason why we're probably going to see a little bit of a different type of, I guess, qualities in the people that he will hire. And he told Isaac and he said he's going to find people with experience that have been maybe in that position before. Because again, you're going from minor league manager to a field coordinator to first base to a manager. You have to make the choices. You have to talk to the media. Everything kind of falls on you, whatever decision you make. And you didn't make many at the major league level, at least managerial wise. He was never an interim, or he was never a bench coach, and interim bench coach, nothing like that. So it's going to be interesting. But Isaac, what type of staff do you think he'll bring in? I do think it'll be a pretty heavily experienced staff. Pedro Guerrero, once again, someone who was with Gabe Kapler for a very long time. So I wonder how much impact maybe McCullough had in that hiring, but I think the rest of it will maybe be up to him.
Yeah, I would hope so. And I think experience will be pivotal with him. And a difference that I will point out here with Skip, and remember he was hired by Kim Ng, obviously. It's going to be more of a collaborative effort with McCullough. I think he's going to have the entire front office behind him with almost every single move that he makes. I think it's going to be a little bit different, where he doesn't have to make all these decisions himself. I think he obviously is going to be the guy at the helm making the lineup card every single day. But, I think Skip was more so on his own there. And like you said, he had that experience of being the bench coach for a couple of years. And so he was making those key decisions. A lot of times I've been told this by many coaches, many managers, that the bench coach does make almost half the decisions half the time. The pitching coach as well sometimes when it comes to taking an arm out. But those bench coaches serve a pivotal role in that dugout. And especially with Pipe, I remember it was Rob Leary played a crazy role with Mike Redmond in 2013 and 14. So I think who he chooses for bench coach will say a lot. I'm very eager to see who he does decide inevitably. But yeah, like you said, there is some experience lacking, in my opinion, a little bit, at least in the upper levels of the minors and the major leagues. But like you said, the Marlins feel that they have a really strong front office. You have Peter Bennix, and the way the Rays operate, you feel like a lot of those decisions come from upstairs anyway. So like you said, the word collaborative, I assume he's going to be okay with sort of taking some orders from upstairs as well.
Yeah, and then real quick, I think we could touch on, we're just talking about Skip. I don't think we've actually spoken about this anywhere, but he's off to Texas to become, I believe, an advisor to the general manager is what it is. And then Pipe, Luis Urueta, is going to be becoming the bench coach to Bruce Bochy. So I think, for Skip, it kind of aligns perfectly, Isaac, where Bochy's on this last year of his deal. If he wants to go out retiring, Skip would easily take over. There's no question. 2023 manager of the year, highly respected. You already have your bench coach on the staff. It can't get better than that.
Yeah, you're right. He did. Luis Ureta was announced to be the bench coach. I thought he was just promised a job with the coaching staff. And yeah, Skip Schumaker, he could not be more stoked for this opportunity. He will serve as a senior advisor to the president of baseball operations, Chris Young, another former player. And that it just seemed like a match made in heaven for Skip. Obviously, the managerial vacancies in Major League Baseball weren't exactly very attractive, as evidenced by, the White Sox and the Marlins. No offense to these organizations. But for Skip to be, I don't know exactly how far it is from TCU, where his son is committed to play baseball.
30 minutes.
30-minute drive. It's not too far from Southern California. If this is a team, like you mentioned, they have a Hall of Fame manager that, hey, maybe you are the manager in waiting. I'm not so sure about that quite yet. But, yeah, he is very excited. And just keep in mind, the Marlins and Valente Belloso and Mazer will be traveling to Arlington in early September next year. And it'll be a fun time. But I'm very happy for Skip. He deserved it. And I just wish this Marlins tenure ended a little bit cleaner. But nevertheless, happy for Skip.
Well, it is worth mentioning that even if they weren't attractive managerial openings, there weren't many to begin with. I mean, Seattle kept their guy who they appointed the manager once they got rid of Scott Service. And, I mean, after that, it was Cincinnati who pretty quickly made their decision going with Francona. And then Venable obviously going to the White Sox and Miami going with McCullough. So that was about it. There wasn't really much else after that. I think the next wave of managerial openings, I think, is where Skip will find it. We'll see what happens with Ollie Marmol in St. Louis. And obviously, I mean, I think a lot of those other jobs are definitely going to be open. I mean, at least the contenders will maybe have to make tough decisions. So we'll see what happens there. But Eli, just talk a little bit about Pipe going to that staff as well. I mean, I think there are reports saying that he could be like the next Carlos Mendoza, at least from the John Heyman report. And he interviewed for this job for the Marlins again. I don't know how much of it probably felt more like a courtesy type thing, but I mean, this is a guy who I think a lot of people really like. He was loved by the players. He was a great guy with us, and he was good for the most part. I think I really like Pipe as a bench coach, and I think this is someone who maybe next wave of managerial hirings as well, he could really find himself in a couple of interviews learning from someone like Bruce Bochy. We saw what happened with Venable.
Yeah, a few different scenarios. Could be as soon as next year if Skip succeeds Bruce Bochy, and then Ureta just stays there as his bench coach moving forward. I think naturally anybody that is a bench coach for any sustained period of time wants to be a manager at some point in the not too distant future. So I don't know in particular how it goes. As you mentioned, he got a couple different tastes of being in that seat at the very end of the season. For anybody that's already forgotten, Skip had a death in the family at the end of the season and left 2 days early. So Ureta was the one that was in charge for the final couple of games of this regular season they went to. So best of luck to him. And I think we anticipate that ultimately nobody that was part of the 2024 coaching staff is going to be part of the 2025 one at this point. Considering that John Jay is officially gone as well, that happened weeks ago, and then everybody else, I'll keep people updated in terms of where they land and if they land at certain places. But overall, that coaching staff was a big part of Skip's success in 2023. During that season, he was very differential to all the roles that those guys played in order to make that team successful. No matter how you put it together, very important to pick the right people that you can trust and that fill all the holes that in the blind spots you may have in your own skill set as a manager. And
I know that Skip obviously only speaks English, so I assume that McCullough, I know that Pedro Guerrero speaks Spanish, right? I assume that McCullough will choose a bilingual bench coach, if I'm not mistaken.
I was going to mention that too. I mean,
that it's very important because, there are a very large amount of players on this team that do not speak a lick of English. So I do think that would be important for the manager to have a bench coach that does speak both, in my opinion.
Exactly. Yeah, no, you're right with that one. I don't know exactly what type of candidates are right now out there that may have had either bench coach experience or managerial experience, but we'll find out soon once, I guess, we hear from interviews or any of that type of stuff. But I think the big part of this whole day at Lone Depot was easily the Bruce Sherman press conference. A lot happened in that one. He was hit with probably some of the tougher questions. I think we could all attest to this, that we've heard them asking Bruce in his Marlins tenure owning the team. And
most people don't see it on the outside, but the amount of focus and the amount of talent that we're bringing to the front office is enormous. We're not only bringing numbers of people, high-quality people. We're bringing new technology to the front office. We're bringing improvements to the clubhouse. We're spending a lot of money and a lot of effort in things that you don't see. So we're really happy as an ownership group to be bringing that to the city of Miami and all of South Florida.
Isaac, I'll let you take it away. You're working on this article, so if you just want to talk a little bit about what Bruce said, and I think the big quote is right there, we will spend money at the right time. He said they did it in 23. He said if they're in the right position to do it in 25, they will do it again, and he's not afraid to do it. But obviously, when you're looking at the current payroll of the team, it's not very fun to look at.
Yeah, Bruce is a very, very nice guy, very respectful guy, and is very respectful with the media. I did not think he was going to be available to questions, but he was, and he answered a lot of them, a lot of very tough ones, and he answered them very nicely. Regarding he did add a little bit of payroll in the 23 deadline. Obviously, with the Kim Ng trades, it wasn't a significant amount of money. And when you look at the money the Marlins spent in free agency the past, half decade or so with the Gene Seguras and the Cuetos and the Avi Garcias of the world, you can understand why an ownership group, because remember, it's not just him, it is a significant amount of other people that own this ball club, would be hesitant in putting in so many dollars in free agents when you have that ROI coming. You just, why do that? So that's why, hence the Peter Bendix acquisition. And him saying that he would be willing to spend money again in 2025 if the opportunity presents itself. Will it present itself? Do they expect it to present itself? I'm not sure. I think they're also assuming that 2025 will be a season of cutting payroll and making up some of their debts during this season, because the way I asked Clayton McCullough if he thinks that the team will be competitive in 2025, he didn't sound too optimistic, or he gave sort of a non-answer on that one, which was interesting considering he's a first-year manager taking over a team that has enough quality players that you could think that, hey, they can at least compete for a wild card spot. But like you said, Kevin, he did answer a lot of very tough questions. Do you have 3 other teams in your division, sir, that are all spending $200 million plus? Why can't you spend at least 150? And he's saying that there is a lot of money being influxed into this organization. Everyone talks about free agents, but they are spending a significant amount of money on what he called front office technology. I'm trying to get more specifics about that. Obviously, the team is dealing with a lot right now regarding the Rule 5 deadline, but I will get that out shortly. And then he also mentioned clubhouse improvements, where I was told the plan was to expand the clubhouse over the coming years to provide more space for strength and conditioning training and the team building, as well as provide new rooms for these players and such. So a lot of money being inputted that way. Obviously, he mentioned the Dominican Republic complex that has been very important for this team. Obviously, the 2024 draft class spent the last few weeks over there in the DR. So he is saying that just because you don't see it on the field, in the payroll, there is significant tens of millions of dollars being spent on the organization. I believe him. I definitely agree. And whether that's the right way to go, we'll wait to be seen.
Yeah, that was definitely interesting. I think, even you look back at the Kim Ng days, you kind of feel like that restructuring had to happen at some point. The minor league system was depleted. Yeah. No other way to put it. They weren't able to develop hitters. It just wasn't working out. And this had to be done at some point, sometime. And that's why, as you mentioned, Isaac, Bruce brought in someone like Peter to make that happen. We see all the firings. He's bringing his own people to make things happen. But Eli, anything else you want to take away from what Bruce said? And I think we'll throw in Peter. I don't think he said anything of significance again, but definitely I think worth just throwing in the Peter Bendix aspect of it.
Yeah, the thing with Bruce when it comes to this stuff is you can be as vague as you want to be, and he can make those claims about it. It's just so hard to verify depending on what he's thinking about in particular when it comes to those numbers and that amount of spending. The reality that almost every other major league organization is also spending a lot of money on those same things, and yet in addition to that, they are putting money into their major league payroll at a level that far exceeds the Marlins. Just for people that aren't aware at this point, the projected payroll for next year is going to be $20 million less than it was for just this past season if they don't make any additions between now and the start of the season, or too many significant additions. The reason why that is troubling, even if realistically they're not going to contend, even if you won't get great return on your investment with free agents, no matter how hard you try, because of how unpredictable it is. The thing is, it's hard to point to any excuses when it comes to not spending. There was initially some suspicion that when they had to renegotiate the local TV deal with now the rebranded FanDuel Sports Network, that they would have to take a lot less than they were originally guaranteed. The reporting from Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald is that they did not really have to take much of a loss on that, that whatever they're getting is, quote, on par with what it was originally scheduled. It's spending money, having additional money can only help you pursue certain goals. Not all your spending is going to be efficient or work out, but it is an important resource. And there's really like no doubt about it that you can use it in creative ways, even if you're in the middle of a rebuild, to expedite that rebuild, to take on bad contracts and prospects along with it, to sign one-year flyer free agents in hopes of flipping them at the deadline for prospects, or crazy idea, actually signing veteran players and actually having them around the clubhouse to provide some intangible benefits to your players. As currently constituted, this is going to be perhaps the youngest team in baseball, or really close to it. I mean, I think Sandy might be the second or third oldest player on the entire team right now.
Good.
Jonah Bride is one of the older guys on this entire team. Like, there is a role that those veterans can play. As offseason goes on, I'm sure they'll sign some minor league deals to guys in that position that might have a little bit left in the tank that maybe they don't. You wait until the dust settles before getting too critical about this.
Yes.
All I'm saying is I understand. I don't think there's any excuse at this moment for them to, as projected, to dial down spending as much as they are heading into 2025, because they're going to get closer to their end goal if they do spend money on player payroll and such. I think there is a middle ground between being realistic about next year but also understanding that just spinning your wheels and waiting for high draft picks to move up the system, that fans are not going to buy that, and they're not going to be energized by it unless there's some creativity and some actual spending that we can see, not just behind the scenes.
No, I totally agree that we do have to wait and see how this offseason plays out. I do remember saying, I think on our last episode, that I expected them to spend very little money, if any, on major league free agents, but that's my opinion on that has sort of shifted a little bit. I do see them maybe taking at least, because you're right, Eli, the team is just so young that they can't go into spring training with Sandy as the third youngest guy. So, and from what I've heard, I do think they will be at least looking at some very, interesting one-year deals of some sort, whether it's for behind the plate, center field, shortstop, relief pitcher, starting pitcher. I do think that there are some major league free agents that are of interest to Miami. And Mr. Sherman did say that, I've never told Peter Bendix that just because we're spending money on all these other things like the front office technology and whatnot, that you have X amount of dollars for the payroll. And Peter obviously confirmed that as well. So I guess we'll have to wait and see, but I'm with you. I think this is an offseason where you can take a 2014-like jump where you lose 100 games just like the 2013 team did and improve by 10, 12 wins. And that is huge. And you're not going to get the draft pick that you want the following year, but hey, I think you're going to see an increase in attendance and you're going to see an increase in respect around the league. If, hey, you have some veterans to not only sign and play for you for the first half of the season, you have all of a sudden some good contracts to flip at the major league trade deadline. Because as of right now, I don't see any significant assets that I would think that they would want to part with at the deadline in 2025. I think they want to keep Berger and the Sanchez's of the world. I think Sandy wants to stay. I think they want to keep him as well. So I do think it would behoove them tremendously to just sign a couple of guys, whether they're relief pitchers or fringe everyday starters, because I think the youth is the biggest problem right now, in my opinion, especially with a first-year manager.
Well, I mean, you do say they don't have many assets. I mean, they have a couple. I mean, Luzardo, had he been healthy and pitching,
right? But I'm not even
doubting it. Same with Braxton.
Yeah, you got to hope that they're healthy. You got to pray. But as of right now, I'm saying surefire. Like, you had Jazz. You knew Jazz was going to be an ass. You knew Arise was going to be an ass. You have no idea about Luzardo and Braxton. But I agree. Those two are definitely guys who you will have to dangle in trade talks in July for sure.
I mean, with Yuri coming back, at some point you're going to have to maybe deal a starting pitcher, and it's hard to say because you can never have enough starting pitching. But I mean, unless you go a 6-man rotation, it's going to be pretty difficult, or you're going to have to move someone to the bullpen. I don't know. That's a conversation for another day. But
every single offseason, we say the same thing about
we do
too many starting pitchers, and this is the year that they've had the least amount of starting pitching, in my opinion. Starting pitching depth going into spring training. This is the year that we had the least. And boy, I think they're going to need a lot of help. It's going to happen early as well because it's like you said, you never have too many.
Yeah. So speaking of players on the major league players, and kind of sticking to that 40-man roster stuff, we had that day today on Tuesday where the Marlins had to make some decisions of who to protect and who not to protect. And I don't think there were any shockers. Maybe the last one, which we'll get into, maybe a little bit of a wild card at that, going into it, but eventually is protected. Deyvison De Los Santos, who was acquired in the AJ Puck trade, was protected. Jared Serna, who was acquired from the Jazz Chisholm trade, was also protected. Then Dax Fulton, who is a homegrown guy from the Marlins, and I believe the 2020 draft, also protected. He's coming off of Tommy John surgery. We'll start with Deyvison De Los Santos, who came to Miami in that AJ Puck trade along with Andrew Pintar, and he was pretty damn good. I mean, the power is there. Struggled a little bit towards the end of the season, which kind of plummeted his overall numbers, but still finished, I believe, hitting 294 with over 40 home runs. I mean, couldn't have asked for a better season. I know he also played some winter balls. So, Eli, if you want to talk a little bit about De Los Santos, I mean, I think right now he's our second best position player prospect in our Fish on First top 30. And he is going to probably try to make a good case to make the opening day roster just with he's probably the best defensive first baseman they have. When you look at your options, it's not a high bar you're setting, but I mean, the power potential is there. And I mean, you want someone like that on your roster. And if it's not now at the beginning of the season, it'll definitely be when he is, I believe, eligible to get another year.
Yeah. De Los Santos, number 3 overall on our FOF top 30. Serna is number 6 overall, and we're a little higher than everybody else on Fulton. We had Dax Fulton still number 15 on our list. As you referenced, he was kind of the wild card in this situation because he's coming off Tommy John. To start on De Los Santos, he, until a few days ago, was also playing winter ball, which I found a little bit interesting. His first year playing in the Dominican. He's a Dominican native over there, and not to get too much in the weeds, but it's a very pitcher-friendly league. So coming off this year in the minors where he had 40 homers, he goes to the DR, he played in 17 games, and he hit 0 home runs. He slugged like in the low 300s. Even relative to that league, it was kind of underwhelming. Still, his future is at first base, but they still have him as an emergency situation, occasionally playing third as well down there. And I think he was the no-brainer. He was selected in the Rule 5 last year when he was a D-backs prospect who was selected by Cleveland, and they dodged the bullet because he got returned after struggling in spring training before putting up this big year. And he's the one that is closest to the big leagues, of course, because he spent most of last year at AAA, put up those numbers you referenced. Still a lot of work that he has to put into when it comes to his plate approach, his swing decisions. He chases pitches outside the zone at such a ridiculous clip, even against AAA pitching and DR pitching, that I just fear what's going to happen in the big leagues if he has that same approach. The stuff is going to be just too good. The strikeouts are going to go up. We've seen stories like that before, that player profile where he's just not going to get on base enough against major league quality stuff. The thing is, he's so young. He's actually the youngest of these three, still 21 years old until June. He doesn't turn 22 until next June. So it's a fascinating case where he's all maxed out. There's no projection there, but there is, maybe you could project some sort of improvement in terms of his approach. It's such a big question because that's the difference between him being a marginal big leaguer and him potentially being a star, is if he's swinging at the right pitches, because when he does incredible damage to them.
Isaac, talk a little bit about Jared Serna. Really got it going when he joined the Marlins organization at AA level, which he hadn't done with the Yankees, and flashed the leather a little bit at shortstop. Wasn't too shabby there. Maybe a chance he sticks. Probably will end up at second or third.
Yeah,
but overall, I mean, this is a pretty damn good prospect, and you could have been looking at an Austin Nunez situation had maybe he not been protected, I think.
Yeah, no, there was no doubt in the world that he was not going to be protected. This is a player that I can say with good authority that the Marlins are extremely excited about. They're excited to have him. You're right, Kevin. I don't see him ending up at shortstop. I believe he'll end up either the hot corner or second base, depending on what is the situation at the major league level. But this is a guy, sort of a polar opposite type of prospect from Deyvison De Los Santos, in the sense that he just did not strike out at all in 2024. It was really a pleasure to watch his at bats with AA Pensacola. Obviously, he finished the year across 3 levels. He did finish the year with Jacksonville and struggled a little bit there, but across 3 levels, at 251, 337, 414, good for a 751 OPS, 100 strikeouts, and 514 at bats. And he got on base a pretty decent amount. So this is just one of the safer type prospects that the Marlins have had, offensive prospects, I should say, that they've had in a long time. And the fact that he can play 3 infield positions the way he does and hit the way he does, along with the Marlins, I'm very excited to see this kid hit. There's probably some development to be done there defensively. Maybe he can grow into a little bit more power. But he is someone that I think the Marlins probably have as one of their top 5 guys, top 4 guys, because they are enamored with this young man.
Well, even you still say he could grow into some more power. He has some sneaky power to begin with.
He
had,
certainly does.
Over 10 home runs last year, and this year I think he was just either had 10 or just under. So
he certainly does. While he's the same size-ish as Javier Sanoja, he has significantly more gap-to-gap and over-the-fence power than him and Xavier Edwards. He is at the highest level. I can see 9 to 12 to maybe 15 home runs. He yanks a bunch down the left field line, but he's an impressive young player that I think Miami did really well with that Jazz trade, if you count Agustin Ramirez as well.
Yeah, exactly. So last one was Dax Fulton, as I mentioned, drafted in the 2020 draft. I believe, up until the TJ, he was like on a top 5, top 10 prospect for us at Fish on First. And unfortunately, he had a tough 2023. Obviously, you got to ask how much of it was due to the surgery, the injury. And then obviously getting the surgery. Eli, talk a little bit about Dax Fulton, power throwing lefty, who has really stood out, at least when healthy.
Yeah, when healthy, and he's just turned 23, and he's had 2 Tommy Johns. Like, that on its own is relatively rare. You'd rather have elbow injuries than shoulder injuries, as we've learned, unfortunately, in recent years with other Marlins pitching prospects. It's more predictable that he'll come back. But I think that is part of the calculus here, is that how long is this going to last until potentially the damage goes too far for him to reach his potential. He was looking awesome 2 years ago at the end of the 2022 season, when he was still right before his 21st birthday. Back then, he was already at AA, and he was putting up great numbers over there. He just has so many starter traits as a 6'7" guy with potentially mid-90s velo and a great breaking ball, and somebody that could at least throw his changeup for strikes. And like, it was looking very good. It's just been so long. This recovery took a while. He didn't look right at all entering 2023. He was invited to spring training entering 2023, and just from the start did not look right at all and didn't perform well at the AA level, as you referenced. Maybe that's because he was already having some sort of elbow discomfort before that, leading into the season. We don't know exactly for sure. And the big mystery is we don't know exactly what his stuff looks like right now. Certainly, if the Marlins felt that he wasn't close to regaining his old stuff, then they would have left him unprotected. I think this is an indication that they, if nothing else, they feel that he is checking some of the boxes in terms of the quality of his pitches, even if it's not happening in actual official game competition. He has not pitched in an official game in 18 months, since May of 2023. It's just a very big mystery. And now this starts the clock on him a little bit. For what he's the one that you'd think is least likely to appear in the majors this upcoming season. We'll see. We'll reevaluate in spring training right there. But you're looking at somebody that seems pretty automatically you're going to burn a minor league option next year while he gets back into the swing of things. It's just a big mystery box here. And this has happened before. I think in my mind, I thought this was the more likely outcome, that they would protect him. Just looking at the history of the Rule 5 draft, there are plenty of examples of guys also coming off Tommy John that get picked high in the draft, and people take a flyer on them so they can take a closer look at them in spring training and beyond. When the Marlins got Zach Pop, that was like indirectly through the Rule 5. They made a trade to get him. He was coming off Tommy John. That was a reliever situation. We'll never know for sure whether or not he would have gone through without getting picked. But at this moment, I'll pull up the 40-man roster again one more time for people to take a look. There are, with all due respect, guys on here that don't need to be on here, ones that don't really have very much value to this big league team. So that's kind of the thinking here. For other teams and other situations, that have a more real crunch, that have 40 quality players, again, with all due respect, on their 40-man roster, there might not be room for Dax. But for this team in this situation that still has several of its very best prospects, Thomas White, Robbie Snelling, etc., that aren't even eligible that don't need to go on the 40-man yet, the Marlins don't have to make these tough decisions yet. But in this moment with the organization, I think it was much better to be safe than sorry in the case of Dax Fulton.
Yeah. So last but not least, I think we'll just very quickly touch on just those small signings the Marlins made, bringing in 2 former Rays prospects, Ronnie Simon and I believe I'm going to say this right, Heriberto Hernandez. There we go.
Use your Spanish accent, man. What is that?
Heriberto. Ronnie Simon was the Dominican League MVP, I want to say. And he was a top 30 guy, number 22 in 2023. And then Hernandez was the number 17th prospect. He was with Texas. I don't know. I think probably got traded to Tampa. And he's been there ever since. And now both of them are Marlins. So I don't think we're qualified right now to say too much on them. But Hernandez definitely seems like he's more of the power profile type guy. 26, 28% strikeout. And then Simon, more of a contact hitter, doesn't strike out as much. So these are Peter Bendix guys, through and through, and we'll see. I mean, I would assume one of them will get a spring training invite maybe, but probably reassigned fairly quickly. And I don't know if you guys want to add anything else to that.
First of all, credit where credit is due. This is reported by our buddy Aram Layden of Just Baseball. Not even official yet from the accounting that I can see, but these agreements are in place, as Aram points out. And this is very familiar with last offseason as well. Last offseason, Peter Bendix's first signing was Tristan Gray. He was in the exact same situation as these guys, former Rays prospect who had exhausted all his years of team control as a minor leaguer and became a free agent. The Simon report from Aram came on the exact anniversary of the Marlins officially signing Tristan Gray. Hopefully, Simon has a slightly bigger impact on the big league team than Tristan Gray did. Yeah, with Simon, I know a lot more. As you mentioned, he was the Dominican League MVP last year, and he's still playing right now. He's teammates with Toros del Este with Troy Johnston, among others.
Oh, he's going to learn very well.
He's our leadoff hitter down there. A lot of similarities with Vidal Brujan. He's a 5'8" switch hitter who plays several different positions. Just not as much defensive versatility as Brujan, but better quality of contact. He had a couple of years ago, he hit 20-plus home runs in the upper minors. This past year, the number was down quite a bit. He mainly played second base and left field, but also he could fake it at short and third, if you really needed him to. Just 24 years old. I think both of these guys, same age range. Hernandez is about to turn 25 entering this upcoming season as well. And Hernandez finished last season at AAA, and combined between AA and AAA, he finished on quite a heater. He had an OPS in the low 900s after the All-Star break, for what it's worth. I don't know exactly how much it's worth, but yeah, to clarify, both of them are getting big league camp invites, so we'll see how things go. They don't have with Simon in particular. It kind of I see him being in that battle with Brujan, with Javier Sanoja. He's kind of just in that general grouping of guys. Hernandez seems the one that's a little bit his path to being on the opening day roster seems more fuzzy, in my opinion. There'll be more of these guys. So these are the first two. Every single offseason, no matter what position your team is in, you got to make a handful. It could be more. It could sometimes be 10 or more minor league free agent signings to plug different positions. So these will be rolling in a couple of different waves that we'll get a better idea about which of these ones to bring in. And they're the two types of minor league signings. These are the ones of players that haven't even been in the big leagues before. There are, I would expect, to be a couple on the other end of the spectrum, the guys that are potentially washed up, but did appear in the big leagues and have some sort of careers of note yet. Yeah, so these are just the early portion of it. But yeah, we'll get a better idea about how these pieces fit together and who realistically is in contention for a spot as spring training gets closer.
I got to give credit where it's due. Peter Bendix has shown a pretty nice ability of signing some of these, particularly relievers, to be fair, but he has been pretty good at signing these minor league free agents.
Hey, don't do Otto Lopez like that. Come on.
Yeah, Otto Lopez. Look at that. Tremendous pickup. And unfortunately, the signing of Ronnie Simon, I guess, sort of maybe hurts my chances of going perfect in the opening day roster prediction. I did have Javier Sanoja making the team. I think it was my 5th round pick. So I think that adds another player that he's going to have to compete with in spring training. But excited to see them both.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's just good depth to have. I mean, quality depth wasn't the greatest last season, as we know. So having 2 guys like that obviously Ben Nixon knows pretty well, never hurts. And one with a power profile, another one with a more bat to ball. So aside from that, I think we have the non-tender deadline coming up this week. I believe the only name to look out for is Bruhan Eli.
I'm not really looking at from a Marlins perspective. It's more about guys on other teams that might be in that situation and looking to DFA ones. Yeah, with the Marlins, usually we look at this in terms of the arbitration eligibles and guys that might be in line for too much money. But Bruhan isn't even ARB eligible yet. Like, it would be just a little bit above league minimum. He's somebody that I think potentially could be in danger over the course of the offseason, but they don't have to make that decision right away. It's a small arbitration class because that was what the trade deadline last year cleared out. It cleared out a lot that would have been ARB eligible. So for this upcoming year, it's headlined by Luzardo, Braxton Garrett eligible for the first time, Nick Fortes eligible for the first time, Bender eligible for the second time. Yeah, but relatively, that's again why their projected payroll comes in really low, even compared to last year, is that so many of these guys are pre-arbitration eligible. They're not even there yet from a service time perspective. So yeah, it could be quiet. I was hopeful that we might see something interesting as we're recording this on Tuesday, just because the Marlins each of the last 2 years had made trades on the Rule 5 protection deadline day. So that streak is over. But yeah, there's potential for just a lot of things that could happen once those decisions get in, whether it's directly from what the Marlins are doing, but more likely potentially what other teams are thinking with some of these players that don't really fit in their equation. And if they're willing to just give them away, for example, to a team like the Marlins, that's one way to use just available spending money in order to bring in veteran presence of some kind, even if you don't expect a whole lot from them on the field.
Yeah, I mean, we have to remember that when they've made these trades during this time, the first one, I believe, was to bring in JT Chagua, who they then traded to Seattle. And then they brought in Edwards in that same trade, Xavier Edwards. And then this past year, they brought in Bruhan and Calvin Fauché, who, I mean, right now probably projects as a team's closer. So aside from that, only other things coming up, I think the biggest event of the offseason, the Thanksgiving turkey drive on November 22nd. And then after that, the winter meetings from, I believe, December 9th to the 12th. Which includes the Rule 5 draft, which the Marlins are picking 3rd. So should be interesting to see what they do there. But aside from that, Isaac, Eli, anything else? And yeah.
You just mentioned it right at the end. The other angle of this Rule 5 protection deadline is the Marlins have the 3rd overall pick by virtue of having the 3rd worst record in baseball this past year. They don't make a pick every single year in the major league phase, but yeah, they might this year. So we'll take a closer look at the guys that were left unprotected by all the other teams. The Marlins are going to have the 3rd pick in that group in terms of guys that could fit some way on the roster one way or another. So between now and the Rule 5, which is 3 weeks from now, they'll try to do their research and see if anybody from another org is worth snatching with that pick early on in the Rule 5.
All righty. So we're going to wrap it here. From Isaac, from Eli, myself, we'll see you guys all probably in 2 weeks. We'll see. I'm assuming we're going to have some news by then, hopefully. And peace out and go fish.